Congressman, let's move on to a subject that you already brought up, which is Section 5, increase affordable housing. Low housing inventory, as you said, continues to be a problem. It hasn't even bounced back since the 2008 housing crash. But how does this agenda address the inventory shortage?
To give a couple of, a few examples. One, as we address some of the workforce issues, as we address some of the supply chain issues, that ought to help with both material shortages that are showing up in the housing sector, but also, if you talk to any home builder in the country, they will tell you, hey, if you know someone who knows how to swing a hammer, send them our way. And so, a lot of these priorities are interrelated. Beyond that, I'll give you a couple of examples. Having the infrastructure law implemented in a way that coordinates housing and infrastructure planning and development can be really quite helpful. Things like transit-oriented development. We just saw an investment made in a sewer project in my district where I went and visited with Habitat for Humanity. They said without sewer, this plot of land can have, I think it was 5 housing units. And with sewer, they can have 220 housing units. And so that's a terrific example of where something that has already passed, the bipartisan infrastructure law, being implemented in a way that coordinates housing investment and infrastructure development can be really very valuable. I mentioned, one of our priorities is to eliminate discriminatory zoning policies. I've got a bill that's called the Yes in My Backyard Act that simply tries to encourage local governments to eliminate some of these discriminatory zoning policies, to allow things that might enable more density, things like accessory dwelling units, more zoning for multifamily housing. We have a supply side problem, and those things that can drive greater supply, whether it be eliminating discriminatory policies that inhibit more density, or tools like tax policies like the low-income housing tax credit that enable developers to build more low-income housing, more housing that people can actually afford, I think could be really, really valuable.
On the other side, rent payments have jumped 8%, and Moody's Analytics found that the average renter in the United States is considered rent stressed. So how does this agenda help those Americans?
Again, if you look at the data, we need about 10 to 12 million additional housing units. And so part of this is, if we can address the supply side problem, it should, provide a pressure release for renters, so that there is more housing that people can afford. I will mention, when we spoke about the appropriations process, one of the challenges we face right now is that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are proposing very significant cuts to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That moves us in the wrong direction when it comes to housing affordability, including in terms of things like vouchers for people who might otherwise struggle to afford housing. If you cut those things, you're going to have more and more people who are struggling to make rent.
Congressman, you just introduced this plan. What's next?
Well, ours is a coalition that's really focused on trying to make progress on thoughtful public policy. And so, we didn't put this out to be a white paper that goes into the ether. We put it as an agenda that we want to work with the Biden administration on, that we want to work with our Republican colleagues on, and with our Democratic colleagues both in the House and in the Senate, again, with the hope of continuing to address some of our short-term challenges, including inflation, and to make sure that we have a strong and resilient economy going forward. So that's the plan. We're going to evangelize this agenda with as many folks as we can. We're going to carve out specific initiatives that we can work with our colleagues on, and really just try to get more pucks into the net for the American people.
It's refreshing to hear you're not just putting this out into the ether. I'm happy you came on to discuss it with me, but is there a specific timeline here?
I think some of these it's gonna depend on the item, right? We're focused on implementation of things that have already passed. Those are near-term issues where we can work immediately with the administration. Some of these things may require passing laws, which, as you know, in the Congress is not always an overnight project, but it is one that I think we're really committed to. And so, again, the faster we can make progress, as I look at the progress that needs to be made. It's a little bit like, all of our favorite cold medicines. We want these reforms to be fast acting and long lasting. We want to make sure that we're making progress that provides some relief to folks who might be struggling with inflation right now. And we want to make sure that we have a strong, resilient economy that is growing and where, regardless of what zip code you live in, that people can prosper, that we're getting more Americans into the workforce, that we're providing relief from price increases for the American people. That's something that needs to happen both now and over time.
Congressman Derek Kilmer, thanks for coming on.
You bet. Thanks for having me.